There you go.
Imagine living your entire life trapped in a gilded cage. You have more money than you could ever spend. You possess a God-given talent that makes high society weep, and you literally live in a lavish apartment above Carnegie Hall. Yet, despite all this absolute brilliance, the moment you step off the stage, the world violently reminds you that you are a second-class citizen. Now, imagine taking a 2-month road trip directly into the mouth of the segregated 1960s Deep South, and your only line of defense is a loud, perpetually hungry, casually racist Italian bouncer from the Bronx. Welcome to Flickwit. I'm Jules, and today we are unpacking an incredibly moving, sharply funny, and emotionally devastating cinematic journey. Grab your drink, settle in, and let's dissect the beautiful evolution of empathy in Green Book. The year is 1962, and we open in the gritty, loud, neon-lit streets of New York City. Meet our first protagonist, Tony Lip Vallelonga. Tony is a working-class Italian-American bouncer at the famous Copacabana nightclub. He is a tough guy, a hustler, a guy who talks with his hands, eats hot dogs by the dozen, and solves 90% of his problems with his fists. Tony is also a deeply flawed product of his environment. In an early, uncomfortable scene, Tony watches two black plumbers drink water from glasses in his kitchen. When they leave, Tony, without a second thought, throws those perfectly good glasses right into the garbage. It's a quiet, sickening display of ingrained prejudice. But when the Copacabana abruptly closes for renovations, Tony needs cash to support his fiercely loyal wife, Dolores, and their kids. He gets a call for a driving gig. He shows up to the interview expecting an old mob boss. Instead, he walks into a breathtaking, museum-like apartment situated directly above Carnegie Hall, complete with an actual throne. Sitting on that throne is Dr. Don Shirley. He is a black piano prodigy, a virtuoso who speaks multiple languages, holds 3 doctorates, and moves with an agonizingly rigid sense of elegance. Doc Shirley is planning a 2-month concert tour straight down into the Jim Crow South. He knows exactly how dangerous this is, which is why he isn't just looking for a chauffeur, he is looking for a muscle. The interview is an absolute masterclass in culture clash. Doc is hyper-articulate and incredibly polite. Tony is blunt, aggressively casual, and refuses to iron shirts or act like a butler. Despite the friction, Doc hires him. He sees past Tony's rough exterior and recognizes the one thing he desperately needs for this trip. Tony is a survivor. Before they leave, the record company hands Tony a small green paperback. This is the titular Negro Motorist Green Book. It is a vital, depressing survival guide for black travelers in the 1960s, listing the specific hotels, restaurants, and gas stations where black people were legally allowed to exist without being arrested or, worse, lynched. It sets a terrifyingly real stakes for the journey.
You gonna be good boys? You listen to your mother? Give me a kiss.
The initial days on the road are pure, hilarious comedic friction. They are trapped in a pristine turquoise Cadillac, fundamentally misunderstanding each other. Tony talks incessantly, smokes like a chimney, and eats literally everything in sight. He is a creature of pure, unfiltered appetite. Doc Shirley sits in the back, wrapped in a blanket, drowning in silence, sipping Cuddy Sark whiskey, completely horrified by Tony's lack of diction and refinement. But the ice begins to crack in the most brilliantly unexpected way over a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Tony buys a massive bucket and demands that Doc eat a piece. Doc, who has never eaten with his hands in his life, is visibly repulsed. Tony literally forces a greasy piece of chicken into the back seat. Finally, Doc relents, takes a tentative bite, and has a quiet, dignified revelation that it's actually delicious. It's a funny scene, but psychologically, it's massive. It's the first time Dr. Shirley allows himself to break his rigid protective armor and just be a normal guy. The racial and class barriers dissolve into the simple joy of sharing a meal.
There you go.
As the tour pushes further south, the narrative shifts from a buddy comedy into a deeply uncomfortable, visceral, psychological drama. Tony watches Doc perform for the first time, and he is absolutely mesmerized. Doc's fingers move across the Steinway piano like absolute magic. Tony realizes he isn't just driving a rich guy, he is driving a genius. But the tragic juxtaposition of Doc's life hits Tony like a freight train. Doc Shirley plays his heart out for rooms full of wealthy, tuxedo-clad white elites in massive southern mansions. They applaud him, they cheer for him, they treat him like a living god on that stage. But the absolute second he stands up and steps off the stage, the illusion shatters.
Thank you.
In one gut-wrenching scene, during an intermission, Doc asks to use the restroom. The wealthy white host smiles warmly and points outside to a filthy, dilapidated wooden outhouse in the yard. Instead of degrading himself, he makes Tony drive him 30 minutes back to his colored-only motel just to use a bathroom. Tony starts to witness the agonizing, exhausting weight of being Don Shirley. He sees Doc get physically beaten by racist thugs in a bar simply for wanting a drink. He sees Doc turned away from trying on a suit in a high-end store in Macon, Georgia, just because of the color of his skin. Through Tony's eyes, we see the absolute absurdity and the sick cruelty of systemic racism. To bridge the gap between them, Doc begins helping Tony write letters home to his wife, Dolores. Tony's original letters are hilariously bad, reading like grocery lists. Doc steps in like a musical Cyrano de Bergerac, transforming Tony's blunt thoughts into deeply romantic, poetic prose. When I think of you, I'm reminded of the beautiful plains of Iowa. It's a beautiful bonding mechanism. Tony starts to sound like a gentleman, and in return, Tony teaches Doc how to stand up for himself. Tony's casual racism completely evaporates, replaced by a fierce brotherly protectiveness.
The tension of the Deep South eventually boils over in the most emotionally devastating sequence of the film. It's pouring rain late at night. They are pulled over by aggressive Southern police officers in a sundown town, a town where black people are legally arrested if they are found outside after dark. The cop is immediately hostile, calling Tony a derogatory Italian slur for driving a black man. Tony, who has held his temper the entire trip, finally snaps and punches the cop square in the jaw.
You half a nigger yourself.
They are thrown into a dirty jail cell. Doc is furious. In a massive boss move, Doc demands his one phone call. The cops, thinking it's a joke, let him use the phone. 10 minutes later, the police station phone rings. It's Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy calling directly from Washington, D.C., ordering the local cops to release them immediately. It is an absolute flex, but Doc is deeply ashamed that he had to bother the president's brother over a local dispute caused by Tony's temper. They get back in the car. It is still pouring rain. The atmosphere is suffocating. Tony, defensive, yells at Doc, claiming that because he lives in the dirty streets of the Bronx and struggles to feed his family, he is actually blacker than Doc, who sits in a castle above Carnegie Hall playing piano for the elite. This is the breaking point. Doc snaps. He orders Tony to stop the car. Doc gets out in the freezing, pouring rain, tears streaming down his face, the rigid, perfect posture finally shattering. He screams the absolute emotional core of the movie at Tony. Yes, I live in a castle, Tony, alone, and rich white people pay me to play piano for them. But as soon as I step off that stage, I go right back to being just another nigger to them, because that is their true culture. And I suffer that slight alone, because I am not accepted by my own people, because I'm not like them either. So if I'm not black enough, and if I'm not white enough, and if I'm not man enough, then tell me, Tony, what am I?
This emotional breakthrough leads them to their final gig in Birmingham, Alabama. It's the biggest show of the tour. They arrive at the prestigious country club, but the maitre d' refuses to let Doc eat in the main dining room, offering him a closet-sized room in the back instead. Previously, Doc would have swallowed his pride and played the show, but not today. Doc looks at Tony, who is ready to tear the maitre d's head off, and tells Tony that if he wants him to play, he will play. He leaves the choice to Tony.
Fuck out of here.
What do you mean, let's get out of here?
They walk out. They completely abandon the wealthy elite and end up at a local, authentic black blues club called the Orange Bird. At first, the patrons look at Doc in his bespoke tuxedo with skepticism. But then, Doc sits at a beat-up, out-of-tune upright piano on the small stage. He starts playing Chopin with stunning classical precision. The room goes dead silent. Then, the band kicks in, and Doc seamlessly transitions into playing absolute fire, soul-shaking jazz. For the first time in the entire film, Dr. Shirley is smiling. He isn't playing for money. He isn't playing for approval. He is just playing. He has found his people.
The final sequence is the grueling drive back to New York City to make it home in time for Christmas Eve. They are caught in a massive, blinding blizzard. Tony is completely exhausted, his eyes heavy, the car swerving. He admits he can't make it. But instead of renting a room, Doc Shirley, the man who spent his life being chauffeured, takes the wheel. In a beautiful role reversal, Doc drives his exhausted friend through the terrifying snowstorm, safely delivering Tony right to his doorstep in the Bronx. Tony invites Doc inside for the massive Italian Christmas Eve dinner. Doc politely declines and goes back to his lavish apartment. But as Doc sits in his throne room, surrounded by all his wealth, the silence is deafening. He realizes that a castle is just a prison if you have no one to share it with. Back at Tony's loud, chaotic house, there's a knock on the door. Tony answers it, and there stands Dr. Shirley, holding a bottle of champagne. The room goes quiet. Tony's racist relatives stare in shock. Dolores, Tony's wife, walks up to Doc. She hugs him tight and whispers in his ear, "Thank you for helping him with the letters."
Thank you for helping him with the letters.
If there is one profound lesson to extract from Green Book, it is the undeniable truth that genius is never enough. It takes absolute courage to change people's hearts. Dr. Don Shirley didn't have to go to the Deep South. He could have stayed in New York, safe, wealthy, and celebrated. But he chose to subject himself to unimaginable humiliation and danger because he knew that the only way to dismantle prejudice is to force people to look it directly in the eye. On the other side, Tony's journey proves that ignorance is not a permanent condition. When you are forced to sit in the same car, breathe the same air, and witness the pain of someone who is fundamentally different from you, the walls of prejudice inevitably crumble, leaving behind the only thing that truly matters: profound, unconditional empathy. This is Jules from Flickwit, signing off. Stay curious, stay clever, and I'll see you in the next story. Don't forget to subscribe, guys. Thank you.